Thank you, Rob. I never forget to unmute the stream mics.
Uh-oh.
The stream chat's probably yelling at me right now, but I can't see it, so it doesn't exist. I guess the first question I'd like to ask you, obviously you're known for working on specific Jaguar games, right? So you worked for Atari. Was that your only role there? Was as a game developer, or did you have any other roles while you were there?
So I worked in radio out of college, and then joined Atari as a tester. So I was basically looking for a new radio gig, and they said, you don't want to come and just hang out and play games and get paid for it, and obviously,
that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
So I opened my own game store.
Yeah. So started as a tester and worked my way up, to being an associate producer, and then eventually producer and senior producer. So my role was basically to oversee all aspects of a game's development as an associate producer and a producer. So we were doing everything from design to testing the games, play testing, you name it, we were doing it, even working on the marketing materials. So,
what size were your teams back then?
It really depended. I did a bunch of stuff for the Lynx. I did 2600, 5200 Jaguar stuff. So those teams kind of grew in scope as the size of the platforms grew. So when we were doing Lynx stuff, a lot of times it was one or two people, and a couple people testing that were like a lead tester and a producer or associate producer, and that was pretty much it. So.
Now, Carrie, I read that he roped you into doing some voices for the game too.
Yeah.
How did that go? Was that he just approached you and said, "Hey, you want to do it," or were you excited to get into it too?
It kind of was. I'd come home from work and he'd need something done, and when you were working on the parts like that, you really had a strict deadline, or you're not going to make Christmas. So a lot of the things were, I need you to come home tonight prepared to make 12 sounds and say 6 phrases, so that he could put those into the game as either placeholders or permanent things, so that we could get that part out.
Just so you had something.
We had some good times. We did some really weird things to make all kinds of different sounds, and it was really cool, but it wasn't like I didn't work for Atari. I just happened to be living with tech.
So Atari saved millions by having free help on the side. I see.
She was voluntold. Yes.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal that from you. That's great.
We actually after so we both worked in radio for several years before I joined Atari, but we built our Foley studio, and our voiceover studio over the years. So it definitely grew. When Carrie was doing this stuff for Tempest 2000, which is what she's the best known for, you want to tell them about how our awesome setup was?
We did not have a studio at that time. We had a rental house that had a great tub that had those sliding shower doors, so it made it echo inside. So we were sitting in the bathtub making sounds. So it was a fun time. It was funny. We laughed a lot. And then they had me redo it because it wasn't perfect, had too many S's, whatever. So it was a good time.
Was it easier because of the limitations of the technology? Was it easier because the compressed audio? Was it easier to hide the imperfections maybe?
I think very much so. So we were recording on an Amiga 2000 at that time, and but we had pro mixers and stuff like that, and really great microphones, and then we were running it down into really crunchy, 8-bit capture. So it was pretty terrible, but our source was good. And for all the music that I did was all mod files, so it was all samples for pretty much everything that I did. So I did, along with doing producer, associate producer, and senior producer duties over the years. I also did a lot of the sound effects and music, so I did all the male voices for Tempest 2000. And I had done an entire suite of music before we sent it out to Magitech. So, because I was working on Kasumi Ninja, Tempest 2000, and I War at that same time, so I was doing 3 titles where most people were doing 1. And so it was, I was getting 3 hours of sleep maybe a night if I was lucky. So.
At that time, and obviously, I know there's stories with Atari and Atari corporation, like they were kind of separate entities and there were parts that were broken up. Do you remember the general vibe of the company at that time? Like, was there a sense of urgency? Was there a sense of, if we don't succeed on this project, our company's in trouble, our jobs are in trouble? Were you feeling that pressure at that point in time?
Not so much with the links. When we were doing the links, we knew that we were kind of getting our backsides handed to us by the Game Boy because of its price point. Even though we had color and we had all of the features that were, you know, able to make a cool handheld game, the Game Boy was cheaper, you know, and it just sold better. So I don't feel like there was as much urgency during that time. Once we hit the Panther and we kind of looked at the initial versions of what the Panther was going to be able to do, looked at the initial builds of the first early development hardware, and then eventually decided to leapfrog the 32-bit realm and move right into the 64-bit realm, which is where the Jaguar was. We felt a lot more urgency there, and we kind of knew that we had to do the best that we could do. So we were sleeping under our desks. We were doing everything we needed to do to be able to make the Jag games as good as they could be. But unfortunately, the development environment was, you know, kind of a little simplistic, and it could have been a whole lot better, you know. And that was kind of one of our big stumbling blocks.
I've dabbled over the years in some game development, and my wife and I are working on a project currently, and it's tough. I've said, and I've only ever sold games my whole life, but I'll say that any video game that ever comes out is a miracle. And I've talked to enough developers, and that seems to be true. So when you're walking around and maybe you hear someone,
I would also add to that when you've experienced working with compilers and debuggers and programming development environments. Imagine having to write your own environment, debug your own environment, and then start working on your game in the course of time that you need to do the game.
Right. A lot of people take
So that's terrifying.
a lot of people take for granted now the systems and the engines that are in place to be able to start a project. Absolutely.
They're amazing.
Yeah. And so do you sometimes, like, if you're out and about or maybe you're online and you hear something critical about a project you worked on, do you take that personal still after all these years, knowing how hard you did work on it and knowing that maybe that hard work isn't even noticed because the final product didn't live up to the expectation?
I don't think so, not at all. I mean, I would say that Kasumi would be the big one that people kind of poke fun at, but at the end of the day, I would say that if you look at the number of games, the number of fighting games that came out at the same time that Kasumi Ninja does, most of those are kind of gone and forgotten. And so if it became just a cult classic because of its goofy, silly, completely, you know, inappropriate amount of gore and humor, then so be it, right? So it is what it is. We worked with what we had and the constraints that we had, and we did the best we could.
Well, and it's interesting when, you know, at the time you have games too like Killer Instinct. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's iconic. People remember it as being an icon, but when you play the game, it is a stiff game, and it's not, you know, and they use that technique, that like 3D, 2D technique, and so the game didn't age super well, and it's kind of clunky, and like, but that doesn't get scrutinized. You know, it's almost like if the Jaguar had quote unquote won the console wars, you know, would we be laughing about other games, or would people be criticizing? It's always interesting just to see it's that memory, right?
It's because you also are comparing it to fighting games today, which are much faster frame rate and much smoother, and you know, yada yada yada. It is what they were at the time. So, yeah.
Is there anything in particular for both of you? Anything you've worked on that you're particularly proud of? Like something you've done, and we'll start with the video game industry, but just anything you did in video games that you just really looked at and went like, I just put everything I had into it and I'm so proud of it.
For me, it wasn't really, you know, I did pieces and parts of a lot of different games, a lot of sounds, a lot of different things. So it wasn't like I'm really proud of this one project. I love that I was able to work on Tennis 2000 because that was my game. Played it in the arcade. That was super cool to be able
right, that was a passion project for you.
I have a lot of pride there because I didn't create the game. Ted has a lot more to say about this, I think, because he's brought a lot of games to the finish line, and a lot of those he had a lot to say about what happened.
I would say for me, perhaps my time after Atari, working with Accolade, I created Test Drive Off-Road, and that was built off of the original Test Drive franchise, which was supercars going around mountains and that kind of stuff. And that was one of the first, really heavy-duty off-road racing games, and it had the licensed vehicles, had licensed music and that kind of stuff, and it ended up being, a really, really good seller for Accolade. So, I was really happy with that. But I would say that perhaps the thing that I am the most proud of is the thing that I did after I worked in the games industry, and we got into a car accident in 2000. I lost my sight after working in the games industry for almost 20 years. And after that time, we started on a quest to make art accessible for people who cannot see. So we started a process over the years, since 2000 up until 2024, when we started working with the Andy Warhol Foundation, and we created a process that takes photos and using the old school early days technology for 3D games, we extract the textures and the subject matter of the images, turn them into 3D printable objects so that people who are in the low vision and blind community can actually feel photos for the first time. So that's my big thing right now.
No, that's incredible, and I'm glad you brought that up because I actually I had a question about that.
Sorry.
No, it's perfect segue. So accessibility has been something that's really gaining traction in video games now.
It is, yes.
And not just the games themselves having accessibility for hearing options and subtitles and such, being able to customize controls. Companies like Sony and Microsoft have both created hardware controllers that allow that allow gaming to be more accessible to more people.
Yeah.
Are you happy with where the industry is at the moment with that, or do you think they could be doing more, or do you think there's more to be done?
I think that all the way across the board that there could be a lot more done, especially for smartphones. I think that a lot of times that these companies hire in an engineer that will put on the blinders and use this program or use the operating system that he's been creating. And that does not really give a very realistic situation or explanation of what it is like to use those type systems with no vision. So yeah,
I would be surprised and not surprised at the same time to know that those companies wouldn't find someone who's vision impaired to actually beta test and alpha test these things.
It's sad.
Yeah, right?
It really is, and they should have somebody on all of these companies, especially like Microsoft, like you were saying, or Apple or whatever. They have people who do testing that are visually impaired, but they should have somebody on the dev team, working there, and they should have somebody, that walks the walk and knows what's going on.
Well, maybe that's something, that seems like something that there should be a group, right? A group of people that a company could hire and say, hey, we're here to, and maybe there is.
Well, we work with groups like National Federation for the Blind and American Council of the Blind and that stuff. And they definitely do have people who are very passionate about it, but they don't have a lot of people that have the experience of working, sighted in the industry and then losing their vision. So I'm kind of like the odd man out these days.
Right.
Yeah.
How has that changed how you consume media? Before the accident, were you a big gamer? Obviously you're in the industry, right? So I assume I assume you are.
Oh yeah.
But you played a lot of games. Are you how do you consume that media now?
So I started playing games when Space War came out. So yeah, I remember going to the comic book stores, and playing that. You got a minute or 30 seconds of something like that for a quarter, and that was it. So that changed my life. And then I played games every minute of every day from the time that from Space War all the way up until I lost my sight. And that was the hardest part. When you talk about somebody who is playing games all day long and every day, it's just like any other thing that you're completely and utterly addicted to, right? So then you're stopping cold turkey because I couldn't see the content that I wanted to be able to play, right? So I purposely stayed away from places like this because the first time I knew that I walked in the door and I heard a dig dug machine or an asteroids machine, that it was going to absolutely break my heart, and it did. So it's this has been a really good healing thing for me to be at this, and because I left the industry so suddenly, to be able to hang out and talk with people that play the games that I made and stuff like that. So it gives me that closure. It's really good.
Well, and a lot of people here, that what I love about this convention in particular, the people that come here, they're very so welcoming, and I feel like gaming is such a welcoming environment. It can be. It has its dark sides, but for the most part, it's really welcoming, and that makes me happy to know that you know, it wasn't something that you had to close out, you know, and get out of.
Oh, yeah.
When you were making games, were you a big collector as well? Like, did you have a library, a secret room that was full of old vintage games?
I had every system and the games that I was researching for the, you know, if I was working on a fighting game or whatever, so I had all the fighting games. But I was never really a big collector. The things that I collected were obviously the things that I made. So at one time we had a huge room, because I released 35 titles as a producer and associate producer and senior producer. But I worked on a bunch of other ones as a tester and game designer and stuff. So yeah.
So do you have a ton of old swag?
Tons. Oh no, I'm not wearing my shirt. I had my original Jaguar shirt on yesterday. I got an original Jaguar hat and stuff that I was cruising around with.
You always hear those stories of, oh, someone bought a storage locker in Seattle and it was full of old vintage, you know, Nintendo stuff or something, and that's like everyone here in attendance, that's our dream, is to go to a rummage sale or something one time. But
I worked with Sony early on, so I have probably 5 or 6 early PlayStation development systems. I have early Xbox systems, obviously all the Atari stuff. So I have huge crates of junk that I'll get rid of someday.
Do you have one of those Nintendo PlayStations hanging around?
I do not.
Dang!
And even if I did, no, I was kidding.
I recently had one of the blue test kits for PlayStation 1 come through, and that was really neat. It even had the sticker where it was from Fox Interactive, and it was just a really cool piece. Yeah, and that actually, ironically, I did find that in a storage locker, but we knew it was all video games in there, and we bought it from the collector himself. But
that's great.
It was just really cool. So what do you two do now? Like, are there any current projects you have that you're working on, or just, you know?
I make jewelry.
Okay.
Ted and I are both working on that accessible art project kind of a lot. So we're doing quite a bit of work with that, fine-tuning, that type of stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of an iterative process. I mean, we want to make sure that the process that we've created works for every kind of photo. So it doesn't work very well for people, but it works really great for landscapes. So of course I didn't bring any today for you, so you know, whatever. We have a website, tactilephotos.com. You can go and you can see what it looks like.
That's fantastic. Well, is there anything else you want to add? Anything you want to plug? Is there anything else we can let everybody know?
Really, that's it. I appreciate you guys having me. It's been wonderful this weekend. It's been awesome to meet all these people. So,
well, thank you for taking the time. I mean, this is what it's all about. You know, we're all trying to do good things for people besides outside of ourselves. So thank you for your time. I mean, I'm sure you got way more important things to do out there. So, but thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. You guys, that was so nice. Thank you. You guys are so generous with your time. Thank you.